In a world gone mad.
1 million kids here in New York City will be back in the classroom this week as the country sees a rise in pediatric COVID cases.
Tonight, outrage in Texas.
It's going to be nearly impossible for folks to access the care that they need.
The massive twister caught on camera, a trail of destruction as the extreme weather pushes into the Northeast.
Whoa, the world really has gone mad. The Survivor's Spiritual Guide to the Apocalypse, a worship series to build our resilience, protect our communities, and create a spiritual triage process to survive disastrous times.
Good morning. Welcome to this live stream with the Unitarian Universalist Congregation of Atlanta. So happy to see you virtually. I guess you see me, I see a camera. We're deep into our new series, The Survivor's Spiritual Guide to the Apocalypse. Members at UUCA received a little booklet for this. Please get that out if you have it. If you don't have that, you can download it. It's going to the chat right now. Or you can pull out just a piece of paper. Anybody can take part. I hope you take part in that way, and hope you will sing along with our hymns. Hope you will light your chalice along at home, read along with the readings on the screen, be fully present in our worship together. I would like to welcome my friend Willie Sullivan here, who is playing piano for us this morning, and our first hymn is number 1040, Hush. 1, 2, 3, 4. Hush, somebody's calling my name. Hush, hush, somebody's calling my name. Hush, hush, somebody's calling my name. Oh my Lord, what shall I do? Sounds like freedom. Somebody's calling my name. Sounds like freedom. Somebody's calling my name. Sounds like freedom. Somebody's calling my name. Oh my Lord, what shall I do? Sounds like justice. Somebody's calling my name. Sounds like justice. Somebody's calling my name. Sounds like justice. Somebody's calling my name. Oh my Lord, what shall I do? Well, I'm so glad that trouble don't last always. Well, I'm so glad that this trouble don't last always. I'm so glad that this trouble don't last always. Oh my Lord, what shall I do?
Thank you, Don and Willie. That is a good way to start a Sunday morning. Good morning and welcome again to Sunday morning worship here at the Unitarian Universalist Congregation of Atlanta. I invite you to put your troubles just a little bit to the side for the moment. Welcome into this beloved community that changes lives. I am the Reverend Megan Lloyd Joyner. I am community minister here at UUCA, and I am delighted to be with you this morning. Whoever you are, wherever you are on your journey, whomever you love, you are welcome here. Are you, like so many of us, feeling a little disconnected? If so, we invite you to check your inbox. Starting this week, we are offering a weekly guided meditation emailed directly to you every Monday. So don't miss the first ever ministerial meditation led by Reverend Terrence Strauss tomorrow. And we will put the link to sign up to receive weekly meditations in the chat. You can also check out uuca.org for more information. We look forward to connecting with you in this special way.
Let me also extend a good morning to you and ask you, are you new to UUCA? Is perhaps today the first time that you're visiting with us? If that's the case, or if you just want to learn more about UUCA and Unitarian Universalism, then we invite you to join our Inquirers class. Our Inquirers class will meet directly after service around 12:30 today on Zoom, and you can register for today's class by going to uuca.org/learn more. Who doesn't love a house party? If you're craving just a little time hanging out with other folks who love UUCA like you do, then join us for one of our stewardship parties. We have 5 opportunities for you to meet in person to learn more about our Strengthening Our Roots campaign, as well as a Zoom option. You can register to attend one of these parties by going to uuca.org/stewardship RSVP. We'll certainly be excited to see you there. Now, I invite you to use the live chat to express your love and your care for each other. Please just take a moment to say hello to each other and to welcome anyone who's visiting with us today into this morning's worship. So good to have you here with us this morning, Willie. Once again, we are so glad that you've chosen to join with us this morning for our worship.
And now let us say together the words of our chalice lighting. May the light of this flame illuminate our tradition of seeking, invite all who yearn for acceptance, and ignite our passion for justice and for peace. Thank you, Willie. And now let us join together in our movement prayer led by Raven Hayes and a special friend.
First, we bow to honor the spirit of life. We lift our arms and embrace the gifts of spirit. We bring these gifts onto ourselves with gratitude and breathe and smile. We share these gifts with the world. We remember to be present. Bow, embrace, gratitude, share, be present.
Voice still and small, deep inside all, I hear you call, singing. In storm and rain, sorrow and pain, still we'll remain singing, calming my fears, quenching my tears, through all the years, singing.
Let us put hands on hearts. Feel the warm connection. Let love in this moment flow. Say to yourself silently or aloud, I will love myself. I will love others. And that love will heal the world. At this time, we hear the joys and sorrows of this congregation. Let us offer our deepest condolences to Jules Polk Procopio. Her mother and longtime UUCA member Janet Polk passed away on Saturday, September 25th, after a fall. Janet had just relocated to Dawsonville to be closer to Jules, and she will be deeply missed. Memorial service arrangements for both Ira and Janet will be announced at a later time. Please send love and prayers this morning and in time to come to Suzanne Wilson. Suzanne is currently in North Carolina undergoing treatment. Your cards and emails are welcome. You can contact Barbara Begner, barbara.begner@uuca.org for the address. You are invited now to say aloud or write in the chat the names of people you are holding in your heart this morning. Offer their names in this holy space now. May all beings find connection. May all people find comfort. May all of us find ways to be more loving to one another. As humans have gathered for millennia, so we gather in this unique way on this day to gently surrender to something beyond ourselves, to humbly acknowledge our mistakes, to ask forgiveness, to seek hope and renewal, to honor the earth that supports and sustains life, and to remember that all beings are inextricably and mysteriously connected. Now we still our bodies and we still our minds. We take in a big breath and then we exhale. We relax into this space that our intentions make sacred. We enter the wise silence.
Voice still and small, deep inside all, I hear you call, singing. In storm and rain, sorrow and pain, still will remain singing. Calming my fears, quenching my tears, through all the years, singing.
Once upon a time, long before Hawaii was known as Hawaii, and long before Alaska was known as Alaska, 10,000 humpback whales migrated from what is now Hawaii to what is now the bays of Alaska. They made this long journey every year in order to feed. These bays were quiet underneath the water, and the whales could vocalize and communicate freely with each other across long distances without interruption. A mother whale could leave her baby calf in the shallow waters while she went off to feed, safe in the knowledge that she could hear her baby if it needed her. Why would a mother leave her calf, you may ask? Well, you see, a nursing mother whale needs to eat as much as possible to provide enough sustenance for her baby. And the best way to do that is to hunt with other adult whales. When hunting, the whales would dive down together, blowing a circular wall of bubbles, corralling the fish into shoals before eating them in their thousands. They could catch more fish together than they could alone. But as the years passed, humans began visiting those same bays in Alaska. Eventually, more than 1 million humans came each year in these large cruising ships with loud mechanized engines. Now imagine how hard it is to have a meaningful conversation with someone in a crowded room where everyone is talking. That is exactly how it felt for the whales, trying to speak to each other with the loud noises of all the ships making their way through the waters each day. It became difficult for the whales to communicate and impossible for a mother whale to leave her calf, as she would not hear it if it needed her. This also meant that it was harder for the whales to feed. Eventually, the whale numbers dwindled because fewer could survive with this new reality. But then, something unexpected happened. A great human sickness swept across the world. In order for the humans to keep themselves safe from the great sickness, they had to bring their travel to an almost complete halt. The big, noisy ships stopped, and the bays of Alaska were once again quiet. The whales began to communicate as they had before. Scientists were shocked to see mother whales leaving their calves in shallow waters because they had never seen it before. The humpback whales were producing in greater numbers again. As the great sickness began to retreat, thanks to science and vaccines, the humans began to travel again, but this time they listened to the whales and adjusted their shipping and cruising routes to protect the habitats of mama and baby whales. They learned to live in better harmony with their whale friends and watched with delight as the mamas hunted and the babies thrived.
Hello, everyone. My name is Aidan McMahon, and you may have heard by now that I am the new intern here at UUCA. I would like to take this time to share with you a little of my story regarding where I have come from and how it brought me here. To start, I'm originally from a small town of about 8,000 people in southeastern New Hampshire called Hampstead. I come from something of an interesting faith background, as my grandparents were all varying levels of devout Roman Catholic, while my parents are what we might call apatheist. Whether out of a lingering sense of religiosity or simply a desire for me to receive a good education, I was sent to a large, private, evangelical school from 3rd grade through the end of high school. You may detect some tension there. And in retrospect, I'm thankful for that tension, because I believe it allowed me to avoid falling into some very harmful theology. After graduating from high school, I went to the University of New Hampshire, where I received a BA in psychology. While I initially joined up with the Evangelical Campus Ministries, I slowly branched out into some of the others, which led to making a connection with someone who would be a mentor for many years as I did my inevitable deconstructing. Through Brian, I would encounter mystics and contemplatives like Brother Lawrence and Richard Rohr. I would also learn how faith could be a force for social justice work, as he began a nonprofit that worked to combat human trafficking, and for which I would end up working later on. I would also meet my dearest friends there, friends who would introduce me to many more ways of thinking and believing. I count amongst them neo-pagans and secular humanists, and it was these friends who, after years of seeing me working in a group home and slowly burning out, helped shape my future by asking me why I wasn't doing ministry, since clearly it was where my passion lied. I chose to attend Candler Theological Seminary for many reasons, chief amongst them being that I recognized the need to get far away from my lived experience in a state that was 94% white and very rural. This experience of constant expansion of my circle and of people in whom I saw the divine at work, I believe built my desire to provide spiritual care to all people, and why I chose to pursue chaplaincy as my vocation. I see UUCA and its dedication to providing a welcoming space for all as the most fertile ground for growing this capacity within myself. And indeed, it already has been. The guidance and mentorship, the opportunities to engage with lay ministry and religious education have uplifted and enriched me, as I hope they have enriched you. And so I ask that you would please give generously for the work of this congregation that is forming me, even as it transforms so many lives through courageous action and soulful connection. The offering will now be given and gratefully received.
This time, if I mess up the words to the dedication of the offering, I have an excuse, which is, thank you, Willie Sullivan, for the gift of your music this morning. You have lifted all of our spirits. Please join me in the words for the dedication of our offering. To the work of this congregation, which is weaving a tapestry of love and action we call community. We dedicate our lives, and these are offerings. We have two readings this morning. Our first reading comes from Sandra Cisneros in honor of Hispanic Heritage Month. Her poem, entitled Cloud, begins with a quote from Thich Nhat Hanh. If you are a poet, you will clearly see that there is a cloud floating in this sheet of paper. Before you became a cloud, You were an ocean, roiled and murmuring like a mouth. You were the shadow of a cloud crossing over a field of tulips. You were the tears of a man who cried into a plaid handkerchief. You were a sky without a hat. Your heart puffed and flowered like sheets drying on a line. And when you were a tree, you listened to trees and the tree things trees told you. You were the wind in the wheels of a red bicycle. You were the spidery Maria tattooed on the hairless arm of a boy in downtown Houston. You were the rain rolling off the waxy leaves of a magnolia tree, a lock of straw-colored hair wedged between the mottled pages of a Victor Hugo novel, a crescent of soap. A spider the color of a fingernail, the black nets beneath the sea of olive trees, a skein of blue wool. A tea saucer wrapped in newspaper, an empty cracker tin, a bowl of blueberries in heavy cream, white wine in a green-stemmed glass. And when you opened your wings to wind across the punched tin sky above a prison courtyard, those condemned to death and those condemned to life watched how smooth and sweet a white cloud glides.
A response to a question. What does the earth say? By William Stafford. The earth says, have a place. Be what that place requires. Hear the sound the birds imply, and see as deep as ridges go behind each other. Some people call their scenery flat, their only pictures framed by what they know. I think around them rise a riches and a loss, too equal for their chart, but absolutely tall. The earth says every summer have a ranch. That's a minimum. One tree, one well, a landscape that proclaims a universe. Sermon of the hills, hallelujah mountain. Highway guided by the way the world is tilted. Reduplication of mirage. Flat evening. A kind of ritual for the wavering. The earth says where you live, wear the kind of color that your life is. Gray shirt for me. And by listening with the same bowed head that sings, draw all things into one song. Join the sparrow on the lawn and row that easy way, the rage without met by the wings within that guide you anywhere the wind blows. Listening. I think that's what the earth says.
Have a place and be what it requires. A house in Elkhorn, Oregon, built to withstand fire, hardened, they call it, with concrete siding and a cement porch, a metal roof, no gutters or air vents, no vegetation around the house. This was one of the only homes that survived the Beachy Creek fire in 2020. In Grand Isle, Louisiana, homes raised 10 feet off the ground on stilts survived Hurricane Ida's wrath because the stilts removed the resistance of a solid structure from the force of Ida's massive storm surge. The close to the ground houses next to the stilted homes were leveled. Have a place and be what it requires. In this spiritual survival guide to the apocalypse sermon series, we are taking a look at what it takes to carve out a place in this new world of ours. Now is the time to take out that guide, and I invite you to take it out and turn to week 2, as we reflect on engineering resilience. And if you don't have a guide, as we said, the link is in the chat. But fear not, a piece of paper and a pen will do, and I will walk you through the reflection questions as we go. Just before the pandemic surged the first time, in late April 2020, I wrote about welcoming our youngest daughter, who was due to be born at the end of that month. This child will come into a world, I wrote, that we recognize when we squint a certain way, catch the light just right. We had been in quarantine then for about 3 weeks. Do you ever look back at your early pandemic self and chuckle just a bit? I certainly do. Somehow, though, I knew before it was yet true that our lives would be radically changed, and no amount of squinting would reveal the world as it was. I knew, too, deep in my weary, pregnant bones at that time, that we would be required to become different, too. We would be required to be different so that we might inhabit this new world, this new place where we now live. It's taken me a while to accept this, that we aren't going back to normal. We are never going back to normal. We are moving forward into a new normal. So our first question for reflection this morning is, what do you need to accept about our current world in order to move forward? This might be pandemic related, and it might not. Your answer might be related to climate change or politics or children or technology or music or economics, science, literature, language, you name it. What is it that you need to accept about our current world in order to move forward? Write it down if you like. This reflective space is yours to engage as you will. I will tell you that there are times that the pandemic, for me, has felt somewhat secondary to the ongoing crisis that we humans have wrought on our one and only planetary home. I thought about this when I learned about the decrease in plane traffic in 2020. You might have noticed fewer planes in the sky, and indeed, we all know that air traffic reduced dramatically. It turns out that up to 90% fewer condensation trails were observed during that year of lockdown, otherwise known as contrails. These are those pretty white clouds, if you will, those pretty white trails that planes make across the sky, and you may or may not know that they contribute twice as much as airplane exhaust to global warming. And so scientists are now working to determine ways to reproduce the reduction in contrails as we all begin to fly again. We are, as individuals and as a global community of learners, learning powerful and unexpected lessons about that year that the world shut down. Acclaimed nature historian and broadcaster David Attenborough has just released his latest project, and if you haven't seen it, I highly recommend it. It's a 50-minute documentary entitled "The Year Earth Changed." It chronicles the response of the natural world to the human lockdown that occurred between March 2020 and March 2021. It's a visual feast of empty beaches and undisturbed oceans, of clear air and mountains that hadn't been seen in lifetimes, and a whole bunch of bewildered megafauna. As Laura Beth shared so beautifully with us this morning, some of the stories are simply remarkable. By observing animal behavior when humans all of a sudden disappeared, we learn a lot about the ways that animals had adapted to human life. There's some other stories in addition to the humpback whales I want to share with you, because even in the cases where we thought everyone was getting along just fine, we see remarkable changes that year of lockdown. The penguins of Cape Town, South Africa, for example, had become accustomed to tourists and locals alike. Perhaps you've seen the show Penguin Town on Netflix. They brazenly make their nest in suburban lawns. They wander freely through the middle of town. They head out to fish early in the morning with the surfers, and they return in the evening after the beaches have closed to feed their young. But take away the beach crowds, and it turns out that those penguins want to be fishing and feeding all day long. When lockdown emptied the beaches of Cape Town, the penguins fished morning, noon, and night, and they fed their young throughout the day. The penguin chicks thrived, and some pairs even raised multiple fledglings last year, something they hadn't done in decades. A similar story occurred in the Japanese city of Nara, where the deer had accustomed themselves to the loss of their habitat by urban sprawl by inhabiting the local shrine and establishing themselves as polite recipients of rice crackers that were fed to them consistently and constantly by visitors to the shrine. But when the visitors stopped coming in 2020, you guessed it, the deer were in bad shape. They nearly starved. Because they had learned to survive one way, they almost perished when things changed. Until one day, the older animals, the elder deer, remembered something important. One day, they all left the shrine and they wandered through the empty city until they arrived at a patch of grass that was hidden behind some abandoned buildings and a dumpster. They had remembered the nourishment of their youth, and they had found by instinct and ancient mental maps their former grazing grounds, and they had brought their children and their children's children to them. As it turns out, once the deer started eating the grass again, they became healthier and more robust than they were when they were eating the tourist crackers. Not surprising, but still remarkable. The story of the humpback whales that Laura Beth told this morning so beautifully illustrates these ways that the natural world had adapted to our human presence and how it readapted to our absence. Now, that image that we saw, that image of a humpback cow and her calf sticking close together in the shallows, has always been, for me, touching and sweet. And yet the mothers had learned to behave this way, to stay so close to their offspring for not such a sweet reason. As we heard, once the noise of the shipping and the cruising vessels was quieted during the pandemic, the mother whales began to venture further. They tested, I'm sure, that their young could hear them, and so they trusted and they felt comfortable and safe, moving a little farther away. Now, this film of Attenborough's is so profound. It's not just for the lessons that our animal companions teach us about adaptation on this ever-shifting planet that we share with them. It is powerful because it offers hope for a new way of living here and now. Because it turns out that when you take us out of the equation, not surprisingly, as we said, the natural world springs back quickly, begins to thrive in ways that we maybe couldn't have even imagined or envisioned. So let us celebrate. Let us celebrate the mother whales hunting together again. Let us celebrate them venturing out in ways beneficial to mother and calf alike, the calves flourishing in ways they couldn't before, and let us celebrate their independence. Let us take comfort in the fact that during the year of our absence, the natural world rebounded and blossomed. Let us revel in the fact that the penguins of Cape Town are hatching multiple litters of chicks. Let us take heart that something, some small something of good came out of the heartbreak of death and isolation that has been this pandemic. Now, the ending of the story, the way Laura Beth told it, is our wish, our hope, our solemn prayer that we human beings might learn from this time and this stark illustration of the negative impact our way of life has on our planet. The truth is that there are things that each one of us, and yes, the shipping industry and the cruising industry and so many others, can do to change that impact. let us recommit ourselves now to living differently in this world. Living differently is the very least the climate crisis and our faith requires of us. We know that big changes are necessary, but we also know that small changes can make a difference. What kind of peace might a temporary reduction in shipping and cruising during certain seasons offer whale populations? What kind of opportunities for survival might emerge if we temporarily closed beaches to offer penguin parents the opportunity to feed their chicks more regularly? Scientists are exploring ways that we can use this year and what we have learned about how nature responded to our lockdown to better understand our impact. And when we do that, we can discover and implement ways we can better live in harmony with our planet and the other beings who inhabit this place with us. And in so doing, we just might save our own species in the process. So our second reflection question this morning is, what change can you imagine that brings you hope? Again, this might be related to climate or COVID, or it very well might not. So answer for yourself and write it down. Write it down so you can remind yourself when you need it that change is possible and hope is very much alive. Now, in each of these stories of adaptable animals, they flexed and they changed in order to survive in the place where they lived. At every turn, their behavior changed to fit their new reality. The ways they gathered their food changed. The ways they cared for their young. When the way things were shifted, they shifted. When things changed, they did not bemoan the past. They found new ways into an unfamiliar future so that they could survive as individuals and as a species. We can learn from their example. Because the storm that is the COVID-19 pandemic has hit us in myriad ways, some ways that scientists are telling us were inevitable. The folks over at the CDC, those of you who work with the CDC, you knew this was coming. There was a playbook. Now, it was thrown out by the previous administration, but there was a playbook for a reason, because we knew this was coming. And still it has been devastating. Millions of people dead around the world this weekend. This weekend we surpassed 700,000 souls dead in this country alone. This pandemic of unmatched proportions has brought with it other pandemics. Pandemics of loneliness and isolation. Pandemics of depression and drug abuse and despair. I want to say that if you are struggling, as so many of us are, we want you to know that you are not alone. Our lay ministers are monitoring the chat and are available for connection and care. The numbers for the Georgia Crisis Line and the National Suicide Prevention Hotline are going into the chat and visible on your screen. You are not alone. And I pray that you reach out if you are needing help. We have each and all of us struggled during this time. And we have become different. We have had to shift and change, to gather food differently, to care for our young differently, to learn to do our jobs and live our lives differently. We have had to tend our broken hearts and let go and accept and move forward in order to survive. And here's the hard thing, and it's hard to say to you this morning, but this is the new normal. The storms are not going to just stop. The fires are not going to just go out. And I'm afraid this virus in some form will be with us for a very long time. This is not the end of the world. We are not talking about the literal apocalypse. And it's also time to stop squinting to try to see the world as it was, because it is gone. The stress of 21st century life is not going to go quietly into the night. We have to continue to adapt. We have to harden our emotional homes against the fire, raise our spiritual houses up on stilts. We have to imagine new ways to engineer our soul dwellings, some ways that we might not could have dreamed of until now. We can do this, folks. We can do it because it is in our genes to do it. We are wired for survival. How do I know this? I know because my dad told me so. I'll tell you the story. I recently began working at Children's Healthcare of Atlanta here in town as a chaplain. On my first overnight shift, about 6 weeks ago, I spent a good time on the pediatric ICU, and by the time the dawn came, my heart was in tatters. I slept only a couple of hours, and then I joined my father, a pediatrician, for a cup of coffee on his back porch. I looked at him with tears in my eyes, and I said, How do you get up in the morning? How do you know these things that happen in the night and get up in the morning and hug your children and go into your life? He looked deep into my eyes and he said, You get up because you are wired to survive, Meg. Because you are biologically motivated to perpetuate your gene pool. Because when your family is eaten by a saber-toothed tiger one day, you get up the next day and you light the fire at the front of the cave, because otherwise your genes will not survive. If you stay on your pallet of sticks and straw and animal hide, if you cower in the back of the cave, then your genes won't make it. So you get up and you light the fire. Now, there are times when we all want to cower in the back of the cave. And asking for help is one of the ways that we light that fire at the front. Because when our flame goes out, and it will, we need others to help us reignite it. That morning on the back porch, my father helped me piece together the pieces of my tattered heart. He helped me light the fire again, kindle the flame, step into the day, step into this new reality for me after everything I knew had changed. Our final question this morning is this: who is a person in your life who keeps your hope alive? The humpback mothers kept hope alive, shifting and changing to feed their young the best they could. Mary Bradshaw, who built that house in Elkhorn, Oregon, she kept hope alive when she built it with fire in mind, when she accepted what is, when she imagined what could be and engineered what her place required of her in order to survive and be resilient. When our hearts are in tatters, we take a deep breath and we draw on those ancient survival instincts, those ancient survival genes that push us to listen to the trees and the tree things they tell us, to pay attention to the smallest details, the little things that give us joy and hope and delight in the midst of all of it, to mold ourselves to the shape of the earth and wear the colors of the place in which we find ourselves and find the people that our hearts require. And then together, we wake and we light the fire. Together, we remember from whence we came. Together, we learn and adapt and change. Together, we hush and we listen to the still small voices and we sing. Our ancestors did this before us, and our children's children will do so after us. This is the way of this world. May we rise to the challenge with creative hope and renewed commitment to engineer resilience, to imagine a future inspired, and to draw together in love to cast a light that will not waver. May it be so.
Thank you, Reverend Joyner. That was fantastic. Bravo. And a big thanks to Willie Sullivan. Thanks for joining us this morning. A great pleasure making music with you and hearing you sing. Our next hymn is It's Big Singing. You might want to rise in body or in spirit where you are. Take deep breaths. Go forward. This is the fire of commitment. From the light of days remembered burns a beacon bright and clear, guiding hands and hearts and spirits into faith set free from fear. When the fire of commitment sets our mind and soul ablaze, when our hunger and our passion need to call us on our way, when we live with deep assurance of the flame that burns within, then our promise finds fulfillment and our future can begin. Of our living rings a song both brave and free, calling pilgrims still to witness to the life of liberty. When the fire of commitment sets our mind and soul ablaze, when our hunger and our passion need to call us on our way, when we live with deep assurance of that flame that burns within, then our promise finds fulfillment and our future can begin. From the dreams of youthful vision comes a new prophetic voice, which demands a deeper justice built by our courageous choice. When the fire of commitment sets our mind and soul ablaze, when our hunger and our passion need to call us on our way, when we live with deep assurance of the flame that burns within, then our promise finds fulfillment and our future can begin.
Let us listen to our hearts, to the earth, to each other, to the still small voice. Let us hear what is required of us. Let us decide together what we will do to enable all of us, all beings on this earth to survive and thrive. As we extinguish this flame marking this hour we have spent together, let us commit to a new way of being in a new world, at once quiet and contemplative and active and engaged. Let us build and rebuild our homes and our cities and our hearts to follow the shape of the earth, the shape of what is. Let us learn and listen as we shift to meet our reality, rising resilient, renewed, and ready. Go in peace. Go in love. Blessed be.